It was a crisp autumn evening in Washington, D.C., when the city seemed to pulse with anticipation of an event that promised to be far more than just another gala. The grand lobby of the historic Willard Intercontinental Hotel was resplendent with opulent decor. A sparkling canopy of crystal chandeliers cast dazzling reflections on polished marble floors, and tables were adorned with lush floral arrangements and glistening silverware. High-profile political figures, renowned journalists, and influencers from every corner of the nation had gathered for an exclusive charity gala. The night was set to raise funds for a cause close to many hearts. Yet something unexpected was about to unfold that would leave an indelible mark on all those in attendance. Among the guests was Karoline Leavitt, the youngest ever White House press secretary under the Trump administration. Karoline was known as much for her steely resolve and sharp rhetoric as for her unyielding conservative convictions. Dressed in an impeccably tailored black dress that exuded power and elegance, she navigated the crowded lobby with a poised smile. Few knew that beneath her well-crafted political persona lay a secret passion, a love for music that had once filled her childhood afternoons with hope and inspiration, but which she had long since suppressed in favor of a hardened public image. On the other side of the room, a figure with a reputation that was equally well known but for very different reasons entered the scene. Ethan Caldwell, a celebrated pianist and freelance musician famed for his left-leaning ideals, made his entrance with an air of nonchalant arrogance. His tailored suit and smug grin, paired with a swagger that exuded confidence, caught the eyes of many. He was an artist of the highest caliber in his own right, yet his penchant for provocative humor often set him at odds with his ideological opponents. As the evening wore on, the gala's festive energy mingled with the buzz of political undercurrents. Prominent donors and seasoned journalists exchanged polite greetings, their voices raised in animated conversation over the clink of champagne glasses. At the center of this glittering social tapestry, Karoline maintained her composed demeanor, exuding the kind of quiet confidence that comes from years of surviving relentless political battles. When the master of ceremonies stepped onto the stage to announce the next segment of the event, a special musical interlude designed to bring a touch of art and soul to the proceedings, the crowd's chatter subsided into a respectful hush. Karoline's eyes briefly met those of a few old colleagues and supporters in the crowd, each silently wishing her the best. Little did anyone know that tonight, a part of Karoline that had lain dormant for years was about to be awakened. The spotlight shifted as Ethan Caldwell took center stage for his solo performance. With an air of dramatic flair, he approached the grand piano that stood as a centerpiece in a corner of the hall. The room's ambience shifted as he began to play, a few deliberate notes that seemed to challenge the audience's preconceptions about his role as both a musician and a political commentator. His fingers danced lightly over the keys, sending out a series of playful, yet pointed, musical phrases. Then, as if to punctuate his performance with a dose of biting humor, Ethan's eyes scanned the crowd until they locked onto Karoline. With a tone as smooth as velvet and as cutting as a razor, he called out loud enough for everyone to hear. Karoline Leavitt may be brilliant with her cutting remarks at the podium, but I wonder, can she make music? Or does she simply pound keys to spout political rhetoric for Trump? A ripple of laughter and murmured comments erupted from the liberal journalists and a segment of the audience, their phones raised to capture this unexpected moment of mockery. For an instant, the atmosphere in the hall shifted from celebratory to charged with tension. All eyes turned toward Karoline, who suddenly found herself at the epicenter of a very public challenge. Karoline's heart pounded in her chest as the weight of Ethan's taunt settled over her like a shroud. She felt the heat of judgment and the sting of scorn from those who had expected her to crumble under the pressure. Yet, beneath the veneer of composed professionalism, a storm was brewing within her. A mixture of indignation, determination, and a long-forgotten yearning to reclaim her true self. For years, she had silenced her passion for music, burying it beneath layers of political strategy and carefully crafted public images. Now, with the hall's every gaze fixed upon her, the echoes of her childhood afternoons in a small New Hampshire church began to resurface. In that sacred space of memory, she remembered the warmth of the old piano's keys, the gentle sound of her voice as she sang hymns, and the simple joy of creating beauty through music. Her mind raced. Was she to let Ethan's cutting words reduce her to a mere caricature? A press secretary who only knew how to recite rehearsed lines and deliver partisan sound bites? Or would this be the moment to break free from the confines of a role that no longer defined her? In a voice that was low yet resolute, Karoline finally responded, "If you want a challenge, then wait and see." The declaration was brief, yet it echoed throughout the hall like a rallying cry. Without waiting for further prodding, Karoline rose from her seat, her posture erect and her expression one of quiet determination. With every step she took toward the grand piano that stood alone beneath the glittering chandeliers, she was shedding the political armor that had so long concealed her inner passion. Tonight, she was not simply the unyielding press secretary. She was a woman reclaiming the forgotten parts of her soul. As Karoline reached the piano, the atmosphere grew palpably electric. The room, once filled with the low hum of conversation and occasional laughter, fell into a deep, anticipatory silence. Karoline took her place on the piano bench, her hands hovering briefly above the glossy black and white keys, as if to rediscover an old friend. In that suspended moment, memories of simpler times washed over her. The gentle cadence of a lullaby, the warmth of her mother's encouraging smile during long practice sessions, and the pure, unfiltered joy of making music without fear or expectation. Ethan, still at his own piano, watched with a mixture of skepticism and intrigue. His earlier smirk faltered slightly as he observed the transformation unfolding before him. Here was a woman who had been seen only as a political warrior, now poised to reveal a depth that he had never expected. In a quiet challenge, his eyes narrowed, and he murmured to someone in the crowd, "Let's see if she can bring something real to this stage." Karoline inhaled deeply, steadying herself as she allowed her fingers to finally settle on the keys. With a delicate touch, she pressed down to produce a single soulful note. It was a note that held both vulnerability and strength, a note that carried the weight of years spent in silence and the promise of liberation. Slowly, the notes began to build, each one a step on a path that led her back to who she once was. She chose to perform a piece that was as complex as it was beautiful, a classical arrangement infused with the spirit of American resilience. The melody began softly, almost hesitantly, as if testing the waters of an old dream. But as she continued, her confidence grew. The music swelled, its chords rich with emotion, carrying the echoes of her childhood and the fierce determination of the present. In that moment, the hall transformed. The laughter and jeers that had once filled the air melted away, replaced by an almost sacred hush. Every guest, from the staunch conservatives to the progressive journalists, was drawn into the spell of the music. It was as if time itself had slowed, and for a few breathtaking minutes, the only thing that mattered was the pure, unadulterated expression of emotion through the keys. As Karoline's performance reached its crescendo, the atmosphere in the hall shifted dramatically. The sound of the piano was powerful and unrelenting, each note resonating with the force of her determination. The grand space seemed to vibrate with the energy of every chord, every delicate arpeggio that she coaxed from the instrument. The audience was no longer merely watching. They were feeling every heartbeat, every emotion that Karoline poured into the performance. Ethan Caldwell, who had come to view this as a trivial contest, now found himself caught in a tide of reluctant admiration. His earlier arrogance was replaced by a dawning realization. Here was a woman who had not only embraced her passion, but had transformed it into an act of defiance. A defiance against all those who would reduce her to a stereotype or force her to hide behind a facade. His hands, once confident on his own keys, now trembled slightly as he watched Karoline's fingers fly over the piano, each movement filled with raw intensity. The notes flowed seamlessly from her fingertips, moving from soft, contemplative passages to bold, thunderous surges. With each rise and fall in the melody, the audience was drawn deeper into her narrative. They could almost see the images in her mind: the lonely nights in a small room in New Hampshire, the sound of rain tapping against a window, and the gentle encouragement of a tired yet loving mother. All of these memories coalesced into a powerful force that made it clear: this was not just a performance. It was a personal rebirth. By the time Karoline struck the final note, a note that lingered in the air like a declaration of victory, the hall was silent for a heartbeat. Then, as if released from a spell, the silence erupted into a roaring wave of applause. The sound was overwhelming, a tidal surge of clapping, cheering, and cries of admiration that filled every corner of the room. For a moment, even Ethan Caldwell could only stand there, his face a portrait of stunned disbelief. He had expected to see a faltering press secretary, someone who would be reduced to a punchline on live TV. Instead, what he witnessed was a transformation so complete that it challenged everything he had assumed about talent, passion, and the limits imposed by societal labels. The impact of Karoline's performance rippled far beyond the confines of that grand hall. As the evening drew to a close, guests mingled with animated conversations, many of them still in awe of the musical journey they had just witnessed. The story of the night spread like wildfire, first through whispered conversations among the attendees, and then, almost immediately, through the power of social media. Clips of the performance, captured from multiple angles by eager smartphones, began to circulate on Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram. Hashtags such as hashtag Karoline Strikes Back, hashtag Piano Power, and hashtag Prove Them Wrong trended nationwide within hours. Political pundits, music critics, and everyday citizens alike were discussing the event, sharing their interpretations, and, most importantly, celebrating the act of defiance and personal liberation that Karoline had embodied. In interviews later that week, even those who had once dismissed her as merely a political figure had no choice but to acknowledge her artistry. One influential columnist wrote, "Karoline Leavitt's performance was not just a musical act. It was a reclamation of identity. In a world where our roles are so often defined by labels, she reminded us that true power lies in embracing every facet of who we are." Others noted that the event had blurred the boundaries between politics and art, demonstrating that inspiration can be found in the most unexpected places. Even as the accolades poured in, Karoline remained humble. In private interviews, she admitted that the night had been one of the most challenging of her life. "I was terrified," she confessed. "But I realized that if I allowed fear to dictate my actions, I would lose not only a part of myself but the opportunity to show that vulnerability and strength can coexist. I wanted to prove that I'm more than just a spokesperson for a political agenda. I'm a human being with a passion that refuses to be silenced." For Ethan Caldwell, the evening was a humbling experience. Back in the quiet of a dimly lit bar a few blocks away from the hotel, he sat with a glass of whiskey, replaying the events in his mind. Surrounded by fellow musicians and critics, he tried to salvage some semblance of pride. "I expected her to falter," he muttered, his voice laced with bitterness and self-reproach. "But she not only played, she dominated." Though his friends attempted to downplay his defeat with jokes and mild encouragement, it was clear that Ethan's wounded pride was palpable. Even his social media posts that night, which once carried a tone of scorn, had been replaced by reluctant admissions of Karoline's undeniable talent. In the days following the gala, the internet buzzed with conversation. Videos of Karoline's performance were shared and reshared, capturing every nuance of her dynamic presence at the piano. Memes were created, juxtaposing her powerful performance against the backdrop of a society that often underestimated the hidden depths of those who dared to be different. On one popular platform, a post read, "Who knew that a press secretary could shatter stereotypes with such grace? Hashtag Karoline Strikes Back." Another user commented, "Politics or piano? Why not both? She's rewriting the script." These digital tributes were not just expressions of admiration. They were a collective declaration that talent and passion could rise above the noise of political partisanship. Soon, hashtags like hashtag Prove Them Wrong and hashtag Piano Power became rallying cries for those who had ever felt constrained by society's narrow definitions. People from all walks of life began sharing their own stories of overcoming prejudice and defying expectations. College students, artists, and even seasoned professionals posted videos and messages about how they had found the courage to pursue their dreams despite the odds. The movement was infectious, a reminder that within each person lay a reservoir of strength waiting to be tapped. For Karoline, the performance marked more than just a public victory. It was a deeply personal milestone. That night, as the applause still echoed in her ears, and the memory of every note lingered in her heart, she realized that she could no longer hide behind the persona that had been imposed on her. The press secretary who had once been defined solely by her political affiliations was now merging with the artist who had nurtured a secret passion for music. It was a fusion of two identities that, together, made her whole. In the quiet aftermath, as she made her way back to her modest apartment on the outskirts of the city, Karoline found herself smiling despite the exhaustion. Her husband, Nicholas Rio, a man 32 years her senior, known affectionately as the Quiet Man, was waiting for her in the living room. Their months-old son slept peacefully in a nearby crib. When Nicholas embraced her, he whispered words of pride and reassurance that made her feel as if the world had been right all along. "I heard about it," he said, his voice warm and gentle. "Everyone's talking about you. You did it, Karoline." Later that night, after the excitement had faded and the digital chatter had quieted, Karoline sat at the old piano that had long been a silent companion in her home. With Nicholas watching, she played a soft, intimate tune, a piece that was not as fierce as her gala performance, but equally meaningful. The gentle melody was a private conversation between her past and present, a reminder that no matter what battles she faced, music would always be a part of her identity. In that tender moment, Karoline realized something profound. Every challenge, every moment of doubt, was an opportunity to rediscover who she truly was. She had once believed that her passion for music was a liability, a weakness that could be exploited by political adversaries. Now, however, she understood that it was a source of immense strength. The experience had taught her that vulnerability, when embraced, could lead to personal liberation and transformation. As weeks turned into months, the impact of that unforgettable night at the Willard Intercontinental Hotel continued to grow. Karoline's performance became a symbol, a beacon for anyone who had ever felt underestimated or boxed in by society's labels. Articles and interviews celebrated her not only as a political figure but as an artist who had reclaimed a piece of herself that many believed was lost forever. Documentaries were made, and her story was recounted in countless speeches and essays as a testament to the power of authenticity. The media, both conservative and liberal, found themselves forced to acknowledge the multifaceted nature of human identity. In boardrooms, newsrooms, and classrooms across the country, people debated and discussed the event, exploring themes of identity, passion, and the importance of embracing one's true self. While some critics argued that her performance did not alter the fundamental political debates of the day, few could deny the transformative impact it had on the public psyche. The realization spread that talent, resilience, and creativity were not confined to a single political ideology. They belonged to the human spirit, transcending all boundaries. Even Ethan Caldwell, whose initial challenge had sparked the dramatic chain of events, underwent a period of introspection. In a reflective interview months later, he admitted, "I underestimated her. I thought I could reduce her to a caricature, a convenient punchline for my commentary. But in that moment, she showed me that music, and by extension, any true form of art, is not something that can be faked or dismissed. It comes from within, and it's a force that no amount of arrogance can overcome." His words, though reluctant, carried a sense of humility that was as rare as it was genuine. The story of that night quickly evolved beyond the boundaries of politics or performance. It became a call to action, a rallying cry for anyone who had ever been told they were not enough. Social media exploded with stories of individuals who had found the courage to pursue their dreams in the face of adversity. From aspiring musicians to entrepreneurs, people shared their own journeys of defying expectations with the hashtag Prove Them Wrong. A video of a young artist painting in a cramped studio was paired with messages of encouragement. A tweet from a small-town teacher chronicled her battle against stereotypes in a male-dominated field. Each post, each share, was a declaration that the power to redefine one's destiny lay within every individual. Karoline's message was simple yet profound. Don't allow anyone, or any stereotype, to limit your potential. In a world where people are often reduced to the sum of their roles, her performance was a reminder that we are all more than the labels assigned to us. It was a call to embrace every part of ourselves, even those that may seem out of place in the public eye, and to use our passions as a means of breaking free from the chains of expectation. Years later, the memory of that transformative evening remained etched in the collective consciousness. Karoline Leavitt's performance had become a modern legend, a symbol of resilience, creativity, and the unyielding power of the human spirit. In countless interviews, speeches, and personal reflections, people recounted the impact of that night. How one woman's courage had inspired a movement, how the blending of politics and art had shattered long-held assumptions, and how every person had the potential to redefine themselves on their own terms. Karoline herself continued to evolve. While she never abandoned her role in the political arena, she also made time to nurture her musical passion. She occasionally returned to the stage for intimate performances, each one a reminder of that fateful night when she had refused to be confined by a narrow definition of who she was. And every time she sat at a piano, whether in the quiet of her home or on a stage lit by soft, ambient light, she remembered the lesson that had forever changed her life, that the melody of determination was the soundtrack of true empowerment. In every city, in every community, there were now stories of people who had taken inspiration from Karoline's example. They were the individuals who, despite the odds, stepped up to challenge the status quo, who chose to let their passions speak louder than the criticisms around them. The hashtags #PianoPower and #ProveThemWrong had become more than digital trends. They had become mantras for a generation determined to break free from the confines of prejudice and mediocrity. And so, as the years rolled on, the sound of that single, defiant performance continued to echo. It lived in the hearts of those who dared to dream, in the quiet moments of self-reflection, and in the thunderous applause of a society finally ready to embrace the full spectrum of human potential. Looking back, it was clear that the gala at the Willard Intercontinental was not just another event. It was a turning point. It was a night when the lines between politics and art blurred, when expectations were shattered, and when one woman's rediscovery of her passion sparked a wave of change that transcended party lines. For Karoline Leavitt, that evening was a reminder of who she had once been and who she could still become. It was a moment when she chose not to be defined by the roles imposed upon her, but rather to embrace the entirety of her identity, a blend of political savvy and artistic soul. It was a triumph over the narrow confines of public expectation, a moment when the true measure of a person was revealed not in words, but in the notes of a piano. As the digital world continued to buzz with the stories of that night, Karoline's legacy grew. She was no longer simply the youngest White House press secretary or a staunch political figure. She had become a symbol of empowerment, a beacon for anyone who dared to defy the labels that sought to confine them. And in every story shared, every life changed, the melody of determination played on. In the end, the melody of determination was more than just an account of a performance. It was a celebration of the human spirit. It showed that even in a world fraught with division and judgment, there lies an unyielding power within each of us. The power to break free from stereotypes, to pursue our passions with unbridled zeal, and to create a legacy that inspires others long after the final note has faded. So, as you read these words, ask yourself, what hidden passion or untold story are you waiting to share? What part of you has been silenced by fear or expectation? The story of Karoline Leavitt reminds us that true strength is not about conforming to the roles others expect you to play. It's about daring to step onto the stage of your own life and letting your unique voice ring out, clear and true. Embrace the melody of your determination. Let your passion be the anthem of your journey. And when the world tells you that you're limited by your labels, remember the night at the Willard Intercontinental. A night when one woman transformed a moment of mockery into a powerful declaration of self-worth. Her performance was a symphony of resilience, a reminder that every note of our lives holds the potential to redefine who we are. Now it's your turn. Whether you're an artist, a leader, or simply someone with a dream, step up and let your true self shine. The world is waiting for your story, so don't keep it hidden. Share it with pride, and together, let's prove that our passions, our talents, and our determination know no bounds.